16, and I'll hit the record here.
All right. 13. 5. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." You said to 16?
Yes.
Okay.
So Daniel's brought in. Now, I guess Daniel was close by. So he seems to speak in awe of Daniel. He says, art you that Daniel? So it suggests he doesn't know. He may have heard the stories, but he doesn't know who this guy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's never seen him or met him.
Right, because he wouldn't say that otherwise. In Daniel 1:21, it makes mention of Daniel continuing until the first year of King Cyrus, which seems to be the very guy who will take hold of the city that very night. So Daniel maintains some type of position under the next guy who comes in for I guess until the first year. I don't know how long beyond that. Maybe it's only the first year.
Huh.
So Belshazzar reiterates the words of the queen in verse 13 and 14 and states, "The wise men were brought in to interpret, but were unable. Can you read and interpret it?" And then he goes into, I'll give you a cloth of purple, a gold chain of gold, and be third in the kingdom. Let's go to 17 through 21.
Then Daniel answered the king, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted, and those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like the ox. And his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes."
Now, remember how Daniel reacted last chapter after hearing Nebuchadnezzar's great dream, but before he interpreted it. Anybody remember? How did he react?
He seemed like he was more afraid, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Afraid of Nebuchadnezzar.
He said the same thing he said to this king when he entered the room, or when he answered him. He was being very political.
Yeah, it says in the last time, Daniel 4:19, he was struck and dumb, and he said his thoughts troubled him because he was like, he was bothered. I'm thinking maybe he liked Nebuchadnezzar or something. Maybe they got along.
Maybe.
But he seemed to show him some respect, or he was thinking, crap, what does this mean for me if I...
Yeah, that's what I always thought. Like, I can't say this to him. This is terrible.
Here, though, he jumps, and I know we haven't gotten into it, but he starts off by referring to Nebuchadnezzar, and not the handwriting. Let me back up a second. Daniel rejects the gifts. Why?
Right. Because he doesn't need worldly possessions.
Right. And in the end time Babylon, I think the the things that they're wanting to give him are, you'll see, they're considered blasphemous, especially the color purple and stuff like that.
Okay,
So he begins the interpretation not by reading the handwriting on the wall, but reviewing Nebuchadnezzar's plight from chapter 4.
Mhm.
Why?
because I think that he wants to let him know, this is what happened to your grandfather or father, because he didn't respect the one true God. And now this is what's gonna happen to you, because you're not gonna respect, I know that's what he's gonna say. He wanted to just like review, see this happen, now that's gonna happen to you. Too bad for you, little boy.
Right, so he's setting the foundation of his interpretation by mentioning Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
And this, I guess evidently the steps that he follows in, that Nebuchadnezzar had great pride. So let's do 22 through 25.
You want me to read that? But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. Instead, you've set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You've had the goblets from his temple brought to you and your nobles, your wives, your concubines, drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, not see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. Do you want me to keep going?
Just 25.
This is the inscription that was written. Mene Tekel Parson? Is that how it's pronounced?
It's close enough. So he doesn't hesitate to state Belshazzar's sin, which was what?
Pride.
Pride. So it seems, and as you go through this, you begin to say, whoa, but it seems as if Belshazzar is even more guilty because he already knew Nebuchadnezzar's story, right?
Right.
We should have known.
Right,
Now, Nebuchadnezzar's sin, I think you guys just said it, was pride.
right.
And the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and sets it over whomever he will. Okay, which it's Daniel said that, I think, earlier, a few verses ago.
Yeah.
Belshazzar's sin seems greater. So according to Daniel, this is Belshazzar's sin. Obviously, the pride, right?
Yeah.
He should have known that God rules in the kingdom of men and sets up over it whomever he will. But in verse 23, it said he also lifted himself up against the Lord of heaven by drinking wine from the gold and silver vessels, which seem to have also an end time thing as well. And the third thing I saw is that he praised the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, stone, which can't see, hear, or know. And lastly, he didn't glorify God, in whose hand thy breath and ways are in. The question is, any idea why the hand is sent? Why would it be a handwrite on the wall?
Is that where that saying comes from? The writing?
I would
Oh,
guess,
yeah.
I would
the
guess
writing
so.
wrong?
But why a
Yeah, that
hand?
must be.
Why a hand?
I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know.
Does it refer to the verse before?
Like, because he was drinking the cup with the hand?
Could be.
I don't know.
It
He
could be.
stole with the hand.
He stole with the hand, yeah.
I don't know.
Says God holds his hand,
Oh,
holds in his
yeah.
hand your life and all your ways.
And wrote his,
Therefore, he
I
sent
like
the
that.
hand.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that one. He does hold, yeah, he's whose
That's what
hand
it says.
breath and ways are in.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting thing is, before we go any further, I wonder how Daniel knew, verse 23, where he talks about the goblets coming out and drinking wine from them. And
Yeah, he wasn't even there.
I was thinking that. I was like, I wonder if they were just like that noticeable, so you saw him on the
Maybe.
table, or if he actually like
God told him that.
lived. I don't know. I was gonna say
Or
saw him
whoever,
take them.
yeah, or whoever summoned him, might have given him a summary. Like, hey, you have to come. Why? Why do I have to come? This is what happened
could have been, you would imagine somebody would have filled him in, but.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
but how did he even know that, Megan, that he praised the gods of silver, stone, silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, just because he saw him on the table? Just
True.
saying.
God must have
Okay, go
put it
ahead,
in his
Deb.
heart.
So he would have
He
known,
knew.
he would have known they drank out of the goblets, but not
Yeah.
about the other ones. So yeah, it could be that he inferred that, but he was right. So Mini Tekel Upharsin is mentioned, and we're gonna see it means numbered, weighed, and divisions or divided. Now here's something weird. The words are written in Aramaic, which is the language of the day. It would be like words written in English that showed up in, Washington, DC, and the wall of the Capitol or something. And they were written in English and nobody knew what it meant. I wonder why.
Maybe because they were all drunk.
Could be.
No, I don't know. So that actually,
That was their
Maybe-
language?
or
It was-
maybe they knew the meaning of it, but they didn't know like what it meant.
Right.
Yeah,
You think?
that's more likely, don't you,
Big.
Deb?
It could be that they could recognize the words, but they didn't know what the meaning behind the words were.
Right.
But it doesn't say or make, we're not sure whether they could say the words, but just couldn't pronounce them. I mean, they just couldn't assign meaning to them, not sure. But it was written in Aramaic, because if you look the words up, and you know how, I think we said from chapter 1 or 2 onward, this is not in Hebrew, but it was in an Aramaic. But if you look the words up in Aramaic, sure enough, they say Mini Tekel Upharsin when you look the words up. And they give the meaning, which is not in a different language. It's like in the same
Oh,
language. So
yeah.
it's kind of weird that they, wouldn't have said,
An
well,
answer for them. And you know what else is weird? What you read, Upharsin, which is in, it's not listed that way in mine. It's Parson, Parsin versus Upharsin, Upharsin. Why is that? What's the diff?
I've seen that. I just think it's the translations. I'm not really sure, D.
Okay.
There is a reason, but I did notice it as I was looking through. I just don't remember.
Hmm.
So the words literally are rendered, he hath numbered. That is, God hath certainly perfectly and exactly numbered. He hath weighed, God hath weighed thee, Belshazzar, and they divide thy kingdom. Now, we haven't gotten to that, so we'll continue onward, but I wonder why the word Mini is mentioned twice.
Numbered. Usually it's for emphasis, right? Something's
be.
twice.
I don't think there's any mention of why it's mentioned twice, but I know that sometimes when you'll see in the fall of Babylon, or the tree falling, or it's like in Revelation, it'll mention fallen,
Yeah.
blank. And you're like,
Well, yeah.
why was it twice? Is the emphasis on this event happens naturally and then maybe spiritually, or it happens more than once in the kingdom of earth? Who knows?
Wow.
Yeah.
But anyway, 26 through 31.
Okay, am I up?
Megan is.
Megan's up. Okay, go Megs.
Okay. 26. Here is what these words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Wow, I must have missed that part. Wait,
What?
he was killed?
Yeah, that night.
Oh my gosh, how did I miss that?
Um,
And
I-
they clothed him? Why? I thought he didn't want it.
He didn't, but they did it anyway, and you would think after like a death sentence that Daniels kind of gave him, why would he even care?
Reward him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, so the meaning, God hath numbered thy kingdom and brought it to an end. You weighed in the balances and found wanting. Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Now, I could see, he could say thy kingdom's numbered and coming to an end, it's weighed in the balances and found wanting, and it's divided. But what part of the words on the wall said anything about Medes and Persians?
None that I could say.
Maybe he knew they were going to be taken over.
Yeah, I mean,
Darius the Mede. I don't know.
but yeah, I mean, why wasn't it, I don't know, the people from India that are enemies too? Why? Or
Yeah.
Egypt, or how did he know that? Anyway, I don't have an answer, but now imagine how Belshazzar must feel at this point, considering he was already greatly troubled.
Yeah, but yet he still rewarded him. And then he was killed that night. It's weird.
So he still closed them.
Oh wait, I'm thinking Belshazzar. I was thinking Daniel was. I
He
got
was
confused
drunk though.
too.
You know,
It's not. It's Belshazzar, the king, not.
not Belteshazzar.
Yeah. Whoops. I was like, I thought I missed that.
Which
Oh,
is another interesting thing, because he's called Daniel here, isn't he?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
certain points. Oh, you know, one thing I wanted to mention, I didn't write this down in my notes. Miny Tekel. One of my Bibles says Perez in it.
Mm,
Yeah,
I think that said. What did it say? That was this. I read that too, and it said the singular of Parson.
verse 28.
Yeah. Perez
It's
is,
in King James too.
oh, yeah. I saw that too.
do you remember the
Twins.
two sons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Grab the
two
heel.
sons, and Perez was the breach,
Yes.
remember?
Put
And
his arm out. Or was
yeah, he was the guy that was born after the arm got pulled in, the first guy that was
Yes.
fully born. And we wondered if that was the church, but it's not, like, for instance, if you were to look at their language, this version of Perez isn't the exact same one, but it's just a modified version. So it might be like he went to the store versus he is going to the store. So
Mm,
even though it's not the word went, it might be just one of that family of words, which
And
is,
implies he's gonna go there, been there, will
Yeah.
someday, that kind of thing. Okay.
so, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say, why, like, that's not Mene Tekel, and then Perez, and that's not what the hand wrote. See
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you are right. I wonder why it's that one. So where's the other version of that word? 65. Gee, actually, you know what? It is the same word in Greek, I'm sorry, in Aramaic or in Hebrew, because I'm looking at the verse and it refers to the same word number. Why it's listed as Perez versus Upharsin, I don't really know.
It says Perez is a singular of parson.
Okay,
Oh, it does. You're right,
Yeah.
Don. Can mean divided or
Or
Persia or a half mina or a half shekel.
You're a shekel.
You are shekel. Now you just sound like Nikki.
Now I sound like D.
so yeah, I wonder why they,
Is it
I
singular?
don't know why it's singular. I wonder why it is. Now, I wonder if Belshazzar was in his mind saying, well, Nebuchadnezzar got an extra year out of the gig when he was first given his dream. I don't know if he knows the ins and outs of it. I wonder if he's thinking, well, I probably have a little bit of time. I wonder if that even goes.
Who killed him?
Well, I'm going to read to you something that's right out of like history books of what may have happened that night. But who killed him? He died that night by the Medes and the Persian troops. Darius, that's made mention, will eventually be, he's like the king. He'll be the king. He's the king of the Medes, I believe, in that last verse. What's he, 62 or something?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Darius's nephew is a guy named Cyrus. You guys have heard Cyrus. He's in like Isaiah. He's one of the generals, but he's not a general that is there on that particular night. Cyrus is like the head of the army. His uncle is Darius. So,
Okay.
all right. So now this is something I found, which I thought was kind of interesting. This is the taking of Babylon and the death of Belshazzar from, I think, history. And I kind of shortened it at times when it would go off on tangents. But if you ever looked on a map, you can see the ruins of Babylon. Right? It's in Iran or Iraq. Right? It's on the river Euphrates. Right? Now it's nothing but a ruinous desert city. But it's still technically, it's still kind of sitting there. So one of the ways that the neighboring Medes and the Persians, have any idea where the Medes and the Persians originate from? Media or Persia, right? But where would that be in modern day? Any idea?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, no.
Isn't Persia not Jordan, is it? Or
Or
Iran?
India?
It's technically it's in Iran.
Iran, right?
Yeah. So these guys would have been, Babylon would have been Iraq, and this would have been kind of Iran. So it's kind of like the neighboring area, the next country over towards, I think it's towards the east. But this is what it says. And keep in mind that the Euphrates River goes right through the middle of Babylon. Okay, it's a fairly large river. But one of the ways that they attacked it was by draining the water or damming the water of the Euphrates River up so they could go through the riverbed and get into the city that way. And that's what they did. I mean, it's kind of ingenious, but you would think somebody would have noticed that, right?
Yeah.
This is what it says. It says, after describing the preparation made to take the city by draining off the water of the Euphrates so as to leave the channel dry beneath the walls for the army of Cyrus or Darius. And after recording the charge which Cyrus gave to his generals, he adds, and indeed those with generals said it, would it not be wonderful if the gates of the palace should also be found open, the gates of the palace where the celebration is going through. as the whole city that night seemed to be given up to revelry.
Ah,
So it sounds like the city, hey, well.
I go on the bed.
Good night,
good night,
Lovey.
bud.
Willie, good night, Squill.
love you.
Told me not to call him Willy Wonka. He told me to call him Squill.
Squirrel.
So it
Sorry.
seems as if the whole city was also sort of having a big celebration and party, and they mentioned revelry.
Why?
That's why
Well,
they didn't notice the water dried up.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, it says, then he says that as they passed on after entering the city. Now remember, these are the troops of Darius or Cyrus. After they passed or entered the city, of those whom they encountered, part of being smitten died, part fled, and part raised a clamor. But those who were with the general also raised a clamor, as if they also joined in the revelry. And going as fast as they could, they came to the palace of the king. So it seemed like the whole city was celebrating. They came in, the people seemed to be, some of them recognized the foreign troops, some didn't, and some just continued to party. So some of the soldiers acted as if they were
were
partying
partying.
too.
Yeah,
Um,
smart.
It says, so they came to the palace of the king, but those who were with the generals being arrayed found the gates of the palace closed. But those who were appointed to go against the guard of the palace fell upon them when drinking before a great light, and were quickly engaged with them in hostile combat. In other words,
Wait, say that again? What does that say?
they got to the palace, but it was closed to the palace gates. So it says those who were appointed to go against the guard of the palace, in other words, those soldiers whose responsibility it was to attack and try and get into the palace, they came upon the guards, and it says they fell upon them when drinking before a great light. So I'm guessing maybe they were possibly drunk
The
too.
guards were drunk.
It seems like they may have been drinking as well.
Okay.
Huh.
And they quickly engaged in hostile combat. Then a cry arose, and they who were within, I guess the king and the people at the party, having asked, what is the cause of all that noise? The king commanded them to see what the affair was. And some of them rushing out, opened the gates, I guess, to see what was going on.
Oh, geez.
And as they who were with the general saw the gates open, they rushed in, and pursuing those who attempted to return and smiting them, they came to the king, Belshazzar, and they found him standing there with a drawn sword or saber. And those who were with the generals overpowered him, and those who were with the king were slain. One opposed the guards, one fled or tried to flee, and one seeking his safety in the best way that he could. And Cyrus wasn't there. This is one of Cyrus's men. Cyrus sent of his horsemen away and commanded that they should put to death those whom they found out of their dwelling, but that those who were in their houses and could speak Syriac, I guess the language that the Medes spoke, those who could speak their language should be suffered to remain, but that whoever should be found without should be put to death. So it was like everybody was sent home, but the king and some of his men were killed right there. And then they just took over the city. Everybody went home to their house and said, well, at least I'm safe here
Wow,
in my house. And that was that.
that's crazy.
So I can't help but think or wonder, did Daniel just finish his speech when these guys busted in or started to make the tumult just outside of the palace gate? And then they opened it to say, what is all that noise out there? And then next thing you know, they're
Some of him to to send people out there if Daniel just finished that speech?
You would think, right? But you would also think, Dee, if the river's running through your city, people would say, hey, the river's, I can see the bottom of the river. Well, something's
Yeah.
going on here.
I'm sure
Yeah, 'cause it
Daniel
would take
noticed
a
it.
little while to dry up, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like they could just stop it at nighttime or unless they were
Well, they-
partying. I don't know.
They probably stones into it, Megs.
You know what they did, Dave, and you can find a lot of history on this. I did this a long time ago with my wife and kids, but you can find what in essence they did. They started a spot way downriver, and they formed like like canals or something off to the side,
Mm.
and so it funneled a large portion of the river away from where it would normally just travel. And at one night, they decided, I guess, to open everything. And I don't think it even took that long for the riverbed to just sort of, I don't want to say it was completely dry, but it was dry enough for the troops to just walk upriver right into the city almost unnoticed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Do you
That
think
is just-
Daniel? I don't know. I
And
feel
how
like
did
there's so much
Daniel get
unknown.
out? He must
What?
have-
What'd you say, man?
No, I said I feel like there's so much unknown, but it's like I wonder if Daniel like knew that was coming.
Well, I wonder because
That's
how does he
about-
say the Medes and the Persians? So he had to
Right.
know, or maybe it was because they were their greatest enemy and everybody knew they're the next, nation over, and they're getting stronger and bigger. I don't really know why he knew it was them. This doesn't
I
say.
feel like God probably spoke to him, Darren. There's no way you can know all of that, and that he was praising the gods of silver, gold, bronze, etc. Like that he was drinking out of those cups. Do you know what I mean? There's just no way he could have just known this by somebody telling him a few things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like he had a vision, or that God revealed this to him somehow. It's too detailed.
yeah, he knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
He
And
probably saw it coming too. I mean, God could have revealed to him that, what was happening as it was right before it happened.
and you can
Any-
see like the sign of a stable nation isn't to, have your son being appointed king and then he's assassinated and another guy coming in and taking over and he dies and his son becomes king and he's beaten to death. And then like, that's not a stable nation. That's a very
No.
chaotic nation. I mean, just
Mhm.
Yeah.
now, so what are some of the implications of that of Daniel 5? I know we'll talk maybe the spiritual things next time.
Good.
And there's a lot. I know just the things that jumped out at me. We'll talk about it next time, but I was listening to some guy talk and I thought, wow, he's really insightful. He had, the Revelation versus Daniel, Old Testament versus New, natural versus spiritual. And I thought, wow, this guy's really, I didn't necessarily agree with his conclusion, but it's really interesting because it's not there by happenstance and Babylon's not mentioned at the end by chance. So some of the things he mentions are very interesting. I forgot my train of thought.
So Babylon,
Bye.
Darren?
What?
Iraq.
It's in Iraq. Oh, that reminds me, Meg, you were saying something before. You said
Oh
something.
no, I said who was it? The guy, the pack, was it who made the correlations?
Just some guy I happened to, if you went to YouTube and you search for Daniel 5, you'll have a whole bunch of people
Yeah.
that will say the same thing. You'll have a handful, just a few that will have taken it and turned it on its head or side and looked at it from that way. And it's usually those people that aren't spouting the same old. They're looking at it differently. And he was one of the guys that was looking at it differently.
Yeah.
What does Babylon represent? Besides, I know we could say it's a natural nation. We only have 4 minutes left. It's a natural nation at the time. Babylon's also mentioned, obviously in Revelation. It's also mentioned in Jeremiah. What could the Babylon be representative of, besides God's wayward church, which we've said before, which we'll talk about next week?
Like the United States of America? Is that what you mean?
Want to hear something interesting? I remember reading this document not that long ago, maybe a couple years back, and it was a plan the US had. And the plan was written in the late 90s. The plan was, these are the nations of the world we have interest in taking authority over. And they followed the script to a T. So it would have been Iraq.
Mhm.
It would have been like Libya. We've overthrown Egypt, I believe, or they had that Egyptian summer or whatever back in like 13, was it? I don't remember, but we've tried to do it with Syria. Okay, so we've already destroyed Iraq and said, oh, sorry, we shouldn't have done that.
Oops.
Our intelligence was faulty. Sorry about that. We left you as a pile of rubble. But we did all these other nations, and we tried to do Syria, which I think we're still battling. But some of the other headlines you're going to hear is the other nation that we're in the midst of stirring up controversy. There's a couple of them, but one of the big ones would be we're lobbing missiles back and forth.
Iran. Yeah.
Correct. Now think about it. If, as you said, Meg, US represents Babylon in some form, and here the Medes and the Persian came from Iran, and we're Babylon, it suggests we're not going to be able to just go into Babylon and take over and do the damage. And I don't think they're willing to let us. Now, I'm not saying that, but my point being is, if you follow what we've done, we follow the path in practically every way that the nation of Babylon did in the Bible.
Oh, wow.
With-
That's interesting.
With Iran being the one nation that we haven't been able, well, I think Syria to a certain extent, but Babylon or Iran too. And here we are trying to figure out how can we stir up a hornet's nest or stir up trouble and make the world be on our side as we go in and do something to Iran. We do this all over the world, but
We do this time and time and time and time again. Like, we're the bosses, like we can control everything. It's just so frustrating.
it is
Why don't they just leave it alone?
right, because they're saying to China, you're not allowed to invade Taiwan because there's some talk about China invading. It's like, who are we to tell?
Yeah.
We're the biggest hypocrites on the
Oh, yeah.
We
But Meg-
think we control everything.
Oh, I
Right.
know. It's absurd. And I think there was, the last 4 years, again, I'm not trying to be political, but the last 4 years, we tried to back off some of this. I don't know how much a president has the capability, but as soon as Biden gets in office, they get out the old let's get out the old playbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
following the script, and that's exactly what's happening.
Agree.
Yep.
100% agree. It's so scary.
Yep.
Less than a minute, so we're gonna cut off. We'll pick up this, try and look at the spiritual side next time.
I'm
Okay.
good.
Can't wait.
Okay, so that should be interesting, but
Oh, yeah.
have a good week, okay?
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Love
guys.
you.
See ya. Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.